All right, so we got a J-League match here between Shorty and Button, which looks like it's just going to be base games.
Oh, we got some base.
Yeah, so this is going to be some nice, simple, entertaining base fun.
Now, I know I've seen you play a lot of base, especially against some of the newer players who show up on the server wanting to play.
Yeah.
I don't have a ton of experience playing base. I moved on to expansions pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think that base, at least the second edition base, it's still a pretty strong set. You know, like if you ever played the first edition base, which doesn't exist anymore,
Yeah, that's what I played in real life when I first started.
That one, my impression, I haven't played really with that set, but my impression it was a much weaker set that encouraged simple.
Money is really good in it.
With the modern base set, I think you can still build the large majority of the time, partly because base has two of the best trashers with Chapel and Sentry, and we see one of those here.
So I'm thinking opening-wise is probably Militia Chapel.
Yeah, I agree with that. Chapel Militia seems pretty clear to me. You can definitely build here. You've got actions with Throne Room and Village. You got Draw with Library and Moat. You got Trashing with Chapel. You've got Market, which is plus buy. And notably, if you were trying to play without building, Militia I think would make the money deck pretty hard because you're playing with a 3-card hand every turn. So you got to make sure you can draw.
So Library provides pretty good Militia defense. But in general, like we'd like to see what we typically look for in engines, which is, you know, you get one copy of Militia, but you're able to draw through your deck consistently, so you can play that and attack every turn.
Yeah, exactly. I wouldn't want multiple Militias. So looking at the openings, we see Button, I think, chooses the correct opening, Militia and Chapel, whereas Shorty goes for Militia Silver. Militia Silver feels like an opening that would be good if
Chapel wasn't there.
if Chapel were replaced with Sentry, because Sentry is like also a phenomenal trasher, but it's one that costs 5, and Militia Silver is an opening that's really likely to hit 5 on turn 3 or turn 4. But they just passed up the best trasher, which they could have afforded already.
Yep. So Button went ahead and grabbed a Market.
Yeah, Button's fine to grab Market now, I would think. They've already got Chapel in their deck. Unfortunate that the Militia hits their
Do not want to discard that Chapel.
Yeah, I definitely don't like that discard play. I mean, like, you're sad that you don't get to trash all 4 cards, but I would just discard 2 coppers and then trash copper and a state. That's a lot more significant of a turn than buying 1 silver.
Yep. In general, the value of getting 2 bad cards out of your deck is a lot more than almost any vanilla putting 1 good card into your deck is, in base at least.
Yeah, and most of the time in general.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like I really like Throne Room a lot as a card, and Shorty is adding a bunch to their deck. That being said, there's this problem, which is Shorty's not trashing, and Throne Room relies on you being able to line up your Throne Room with other actions, which is going to be unreliable if your deck is still full of junk. And we saw last turn, you know, Shorty drew the Throne Room and dressed a bunch of treasures, and it ended up being useless.
Yep. It's also worth noting that a lot of the actions here aren't particularly good with Throne Room. Like Militia, you don't get any effect for it. Library doesn't really work with Throne Room either. Mine, I guess, technically does, but mine's pretty weak.
Yeah, definitely don't get mine here. We'll have to talk about it in a second.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that you probably want to use Village as your village.
I'm still on Team Throne Room here. You can throw.
You want to use Throne Room as your primary village?
Village, Workshop, Moat, all those are good targets. I'd play with Villages as well, but I'd be happy to have some Throne Rooms in my deck. Throne Room is just such a good card.
I mean, it's my favorite card in base. It's wild. It's like one of the things that when you first start playing with it and it really clicks, you're like, oh, this is a good game.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe it's not obvious why Throne Room can be a substitute for a village. But the important thing to note is, you know, Throne Room lets you play an action card twice, but you're not spending an action to do each of those plays of an action. You only spent 1 action, which is on the Throne Room. And so what you've essentially gotten out of Throne Room is you got to play an action card twice while spending only one action on the throne room. And so you saved an action on an action card play, which is kind of equivalent to what Village does, which is just gives you an extra action in advance. And so Throne Room is really nice because on top of letting you play a card a second time, it's letting you do it without the action cost, which is honestly, I think, its biggest benefit and usually overlooked.
Yep, and something that comes up a lot is when you have a card that gives you +1 action, there's nothing really on this board besides, this market. So you can use Throne Room on a market, and it's as if you played a village because you double that market, so you get +2 actions.
Yeah, exactly. If you had a hand that was like Throne Room, Market, and Moat, or Throne Room, Market, and Library, and you wanted to make sure your Moat or your Library didn't dud, then you could Throne Room on Market first, get 2 actions, then play Moat, and you've still got an action left over in case you draw additional actions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yes, this is still game 1.
So I think one of the big problems Shorty is having right now is something that you pointed out, which is that since they're not very trash, they're having a hard time lining their throne rooms up with action cards for them to play. And they also just made a bit of a misplay a turn ago where they played the village, not throning it. You really want to throne that village. You want to draw as much as possible. Throning a militia is not like your ideal case.
Yeah. Let's talk about that mine for a second. Oh, they both have a mine now. Mine's not a very good card. I think it's among the weakest in base set. Maybe second worst after Bureaucrat. I have to think about that, but it's really far down there. The problem is it's just so... Well, twofold. First is it's so slow. Right? The turn you play it, it's like a copper, but it's like a copper that costs an action. Because if you had a copper in hand already and you turn it into a silver, you've only increased your value by 1. And that can accumulate over the course of the game, but it's really slow to get a lot of mine plays in and really add up in time. And so if you get mine, you got to get it really early, which is not when you normally want to be getting mine, because you don't want to be adding payload to your decks early. You want to be getting control of your deck early. If you add it late, it doesn't have time to pay off. The second problem with mine is it's not really a trasher. If you think of a trasher for most purposes as a card that helps your deck get thinner, right? Like Chapel or Sentry helps you get a thin, clean deck. Mine's just replacing one treasure with another treasure, which isn't actually helping your deck find its actions any more reliably. Like the treasure is slightly more valuable now for you, but it's still a treasure and it's still getting in the way.
Yeah. Andy, to answer your question about mine with Platinum definitely makes mine better, but I'd say mine's biggest synergies are with like 5 cost Kingdom treasures, things like upgrading things into horns or spices, something like that. Also with Menagerie, we now have supplies and stockpile. Other great things to upgrade into.
Yeah,
is a bit, if you could be, it's just mine's a little slow just to be getting platinums. You have to have a gold turn it into a platinum. It does get you more than a coin that turn. It gets you 2 coins, but it's not really that good.
Yeah, mine is never going to be amazing, but I would say its best cases are when you're turning the treasure into something that's sort of like, for whatever functional reason, not a treasure. So like mining something into crown is not bad because you've taken a treasure out of your deck and replaced it with something that is, for most purposes, just an action card. And because crown is action and treasure, and you're usually going to play it as an action card. Or mining into supplies is not bad because supplies is not a stop card because it gives you a horse. Mining into Coin of the Realm can thin your deck. Stuff like that makes mine like a passable thinner. And if mine can thin, then you can justify getting it earlier a bit more often. It's not going to be great, but those make it better.
Agreed. So they're really driving the throne room and market piles.
There's 2 piles here that look substantially untouched to me, which are library and moat. So draw is really important. Draw is like the most valuable thing you can have. And there's 2 cards in this game that net draw you cards. Library and moat are the only 2 ways here you can increase your hand size. And one of them has a singular moat. None of them have any libraries. Which means that in the best of cases, Shorty's hand will never be larger than 5 cards at a time. Buttons can potentially get up to as high as 7 if they thrown their 1 moat. But that's it. And so we're playing with like really small, shallow hands that aren't ever doing a whole
we got
lot.
a library.
All right, that's good. Better late than never. And we have yet another one of these throne room hands that are the consequence of them not getting trashed.
Yep.
Yeah, and with Militia, that's even more severe, right? So like Shorty will have a 3-card hand most of the time. and Button would have a 5-card hand in the best of cases, even if they got to throw in their moat. So yeah, draw is really important. In general, I think a big problem players make early on is they prioritize economy too much, like golds and silvers and stuff, like adding a bunch of treasure to your deck for money, and not deck control, which is being able to reliably draw the treasures that you do have. And the latter is just a lot better. You usually don't want to be bulking up on your economy until you've already got your deck under control, like you're drawing your whole deck every turn. And the reason for that is if you're drawing your deck every turn, it's very easy to scale up your payload really fast. You know, I had, let's say, 1 silver to my deck, and I see it every single turn. That silver was going to be $2 every turn. Whereas if I had 1 silver to a thick deck, it's marginally increased the average amount of my hand from, like, 1.5 to 1.6 or something like that, because I'm only seeing it every few turns.
Yep. As someone once said to me, it's a lot easier to add payload to your engine that works than to add engine to your payload.
Yeah.
So a little bit of a misplay there by Shorty. They didn't throne the mine, so they're only able to get 1 upgrade, not go all the way to a gold.
Yeah, I don't understand why they would voluntarily pass up on a free extra mine play.
No, you want to throne those markets. There we go.
Look at all that money.
So Button's deck looks like it's really coming together.
I would remove the really from that. It's
okay. Comparatively,
comparative. We're starting to see like the slightest hints of what these decks ought to look like. Right, you're chaining a bunch of actions together. Now that deck could do a whole lot more if there were any draw cards in it. That Button's deck is severely lacking on draw. And that would make it a lot easier to be setting up these turns reliably. Like if that mine had been a library way back when, this deck would be doing a lot more right now.
Or like right there, they just bought a silver. You don't need silver in your deck. Money is not the problem.
Yeah.
Like you adding some moats instead so that you could draw would go a lot further.
Yeah, like imagine if every one of your turns looked like that last turn or better. Right?
So here they have to play the library first. Okay, that's good. They got that. So yeah, library is a pretty powerful card. It's it's a lot of draw and it works great against hand size attacks like militia.
Yep. There should not still be coppers in this deck. Coppers should have been gone a long time ago.
Yeah.
With Chapel in the Kingdom in the base set, the 100% of the time, the correct strategy is going to be get Chapel, turn 1 or turn 2. Those two are equivalent. It doesn't matter whether you get it turn 1 or turn 2, because you don't shuffle your deck until after turn 2. So you'll see Chapel equally fast either way. But you got to get it turn 1 or turn 2. And then you're trashing all of your coppers and estates as quickly as you can. And then your deck is really thin, and then it built up very quickly from there, for the reasons we were saying a second ago. Shorty got this Chapel really late, and the later you wait on Chapel, the much, much less effective it gets, because it's going to be hard to line the Chapel up with the coppers and estates as reliably if you're putting it into a deck that's thick with other stuff. You want to get it on those turns where you're likely to get it with 4 other coppers and estates, which is the very starting turns.
Yep. And the thing about it, and I think things in general, a big part of Dominion is that this idea of cascading failure, where if you fail to get Chapel early, your deck is bigger, you're not seeing Chapel as much when you do add it to your deck. And so it's not just that like you didn't get it early, but you're making all your future turns like decently worse by not getting it at a reasonable time. The earlier you get it, the better all your turns in front of that are going to be.
Yep. So Shorty's got an interesting hand here that I think will be difficult to play correctly, but we'll see if they find it. This is potentially a great hand if they execute it right. You want to play all your thrones.
This could be the win if they get it.
Yeah, all your thrones, then your militia, then your library. And then you'll draw a 7-card hand, and you'll be able to play on as long as you find any one other action. Oh, that was not quite right, but that's they got
the biggest part, which is starting a throne room chain.
Yeah,
but yeah, you want to play militia. That way, your library draws another card.
Yeah.
But this looks like a win in hand. So, game 1 goes to Shorty. A real gentleman wouldn't play that militia.
Yeah. You didn't need to play this militia. You already had enough money to buy the province.
They're newer
Make
players, though. I mean,
your opponent
I'm not actually giving them any grief for it.
All right.
And Shorty takes game 1.
Victory coppers. You'll have to inform me what that is.
Yeah, what are victory coppers? I guess when you have extra buys and you like pile out or something, you buy some coppers with your extra buys. That's what I'm guessing. Yeah.
I feel like he still does that. I feel like I've still seen him buy coppers. Yeah, what's Psychomatics saying? I was not aware there was a oh, well, Shorty's already gone. What happened? I'm confused. They've only played one game.
Let's just say the server kicked them. It happens sometimes.
I'm a little confused.
Well, this is
Shorty. Why'd they leave?
Should I?
The J Leaguers are an enigma.
You get some pretty interesting stuff here. I really hope that's not right, Assemble Me. Okay, looks like they left. Let's look for a new table.
I'm a bit perplexed. Oh, well, they got a new table up.
I'm still going to go with some weird glitch or something. They got kicked from the table. They couldn't rejoin. Like, there's some weird stuff that happens.
Here's my hypothesis. They're aware that you're supposed to switch player order each game, but they don't realize that you can do that in the settings, and then they're alternating, like, I'll start the game, you start the... I don't know, they seem to understand that you can choose. Okay. Yeah, okay, there goes my hypothesis. I don't know why they left and started a new table.
Glitch in the Matrix.
Yeah. Who'd started last game? I don't even know.
Well, you could tell because Button's still in blue, so that means Shorty was player 1.
Yeah, Shorty did start last game. And we're red. I will say first player advantage is probably a lot less significant in these games
this level?
than in other games, because the games last much longer, and like a 1-turn advantage over the course of like a 20-turn game is less impactful than one over like a 10-turn game.
Especially when the amount that they're getting done per turn is smaller, both as a factor of playing base only and just the level of decks they're building.
This one's kind of interesting. So you can definitely build an engine here, although it's a bit tricky, and I wouldn't expect it to be done very effectively, I think.
Oh no!
In the J Leagues, Artisan for Duchies is not bad. I think I would take an Artisan, I guess, at some point, just to threaten that possibility. For most purposes of building here, though, I think Workshop is going to be the good gainer early on, because all the cards I want cost 3 or 4.
Yeah, I mean, Artisan is the only gains besides Workshop, so I definitely want one. It definitely gives you a lot more threat in the end game when you can take duchies.
Basically, I want like probably 2 workshops and then lots of villages, smithies, and throne rooms. And then you can take an artisan and then start to buy province.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah.
So Shorty again skips out on opening Chapel.
Yeah, so looking at the openings, I don't like either of them that much this time. So Shorty's got this chronic habit of not trashing their cards early enough, which is obviously a bit of a mistake. Button's problem is they've got a Mine, and we talked about Mine not being a super great card, which is no less true in this kingdom. I think maybe they got that sort of symptoms of, oh, well, I've got 5, I better spin 5. The $5 cards must be better than the $4 cards, must be better than the $3 cards. So I'm gonna buy the nice expensive $5 card here. But I don't want a Mine in my deck ever in this kingdom, in most kingdoms. I would open probably Chapel Workshop or Chapel Poacher would also be fine.
I think I like Chapel Poacher just because you get a little bit more cycling to make your Chapel hit.
Oh no! Don't say it ain't so. Did they really buy a Mine for 6? Oh, they did.
So let's talk about why we don't like Mine. I think the big thing is that it's a terminal, so it uses up your terminal space, but it only provides you a very small advantage. Yeah. You're effectively only getting 1 coin, and in general, the ability to get treasures isn't a particularly strong one. As counterintuitive as that might be, treasure is not that good.
Yeah. And I think there's an additional sort of confusion here, which is that in this kingdom, there's another card that costs 6, Artisan, and gives you $5 action cards. So if you wanted Mine, you could get the Artisan, play it, get the Mine that way, and then still have the Mine, but with an Artisan in your deck as well. An Artisan is not a bad card. I would think probably gaining a few silvers off of Workshop would be my main payload. I want to drain the pile, so I don't want a lot of poachers.
Yeah, I don't want 5 poachers. Some mix of... you're using Throne Rooms, Village, Smithy to draw. You got some poachers in there. I mean, you're still playing with primarily treasure payload, like rather than poached stuff. But
yeah,
I don't think you need to get Mine involved.
I think my in-game payload is going to be, at some point, I use Workshop to get 4 silvers so I can afford Province. And then my deck will have exactly 4 silvers and no other treasures. A lot of Villages, Smithies, and Throne Rooms. And then an Artisan and some Workshops. So I can threaten to not just gain a Province per turn, but potentially like a Province, 2 Duchies, and 2 Estates or something like that in the final turns. Now the one thing that does cap this kingdom a bit is there's no plus buy. So you cannot build up to anything more than single province as far as your buys go. And
right,
so
like you were hearing us say at the start, like, well, it's harder to build here. And what we mean is that the engine doesn't have as big a reward because you can't build something that can start taking a bunch of green cards at once without the plus buy. Now, Artisan is gains and can act like that, but it can only grab you duchies in the same way Workshop can only grab you estates.
Yeah. Now, that's enough to make it worth building, right? You can build a deck that does more than 1 province per turn. Just here, the more than is not additional provinces; it's province and some duchies, and so that's enough to justify trying to build a big deck. That being said, it does also influence the way your deck ends up looking like. So, like in the previous game, for example, you can add a bunch of payload to your engine eventually and make use of it all. Like you can be hitting 16, 24, however much money, and buy lots of stuff. Here, because you only have 1 buy, you never have any incentive to have more than 8 money in your deck. You have to be drawing your deck and finding that 8 money every turn. And then you have 1 buy, and so there's nothing that you could possibly want more than 8 money for.
Yeah, and that's definitely something I see a trap newer players fall into, is that they want to put a ton of treasure in their deck so that they can buy provinces because they're not used to drawing their deck as well. So they want to add reliability by adding more treasure. But the deck that only keeps $8 in money and the rest of it is cards that can draw that $8 is going to be way more consistent than a deck that can't draw as well but has a lot more money in it.
I'm kind of confused. Button had additional actions there in that turn, right? And they could have continued playing? Why did they stop early? And why did they buy gold?
They stopped early because they put all their actions on top of their deck.
But they could have not done that. They could have played the actions.
Yes.
I'm a little confused by that. I would have liked to draw through my cards and get a big Chapel trash off. I also really dislike the gold buy. Gold. Gold's not a very good card, and players like to buy it a lot more than they ought to. It's shiny and it costs a lot, and so I think people assume that if they can get gold, then they really ought to get gold. But it's just the big problem with gold is it comes at the trade-off of getting like any number of action cards, which just tend to be a lot stronger cards.
And here it directly competes against Artisan.
Yeah, if you can get like an Artisan or something, then you probably should be getting an Artisan. Silver has its functions because you can get it when you need to afford an action that you otherwise couldn't afford. Like, oh no, I can't get to my Sentry or my Artisan because I don't have enough money yet. I'll add a silver as a stepping stone to make that more likely. Gold never really
on this board too, you can easily add silvers with something like Workshop, whereas the only way you're adding gold besides buying it here is mining your way up to it, which is slow.
Yeah, that's the second big consideration. This one's specific to this kingdom and won't be like as generally applicable. But in this kingdom as well, when you're constrained on your buys, you want to be thinking about how can I get cards via methods other than buying them, right? Because if I want my deck to scale up quickly, I want to be getting more than one card in my deck per turn, and I can only buy one card per turn. So the cards that are real important here are Workshop and Artisan, because they can help you get additional cards into your deck, even if you can only buy one card. And so there's another reason silver wins out is I can get silvers without wasting buys on them, whereas I can't get golds without wasting a buy on it.
Mm-hmm.
I only need 8, so it's not like having like a huge number like 11 with a bunch of gold or something like that is all that valuable here in the first place.
Yeah, like you can see Sutton's button is drawing a lot right here, and they can't spend most of this treasure.
Throning that smithy did nothing. They only had 3 cards left in their deck, and then they attempted to draw 6 cards. You could have just played the smithy normally and saved your throne room to throne the
Artisan.
The Artisan, yeah. I also would not have mined the copper. Oh, stop mining the... No. Yeah, just turn the silvers into golds and then trash everything else. You don't... like.
You want to increase your money density as much as possible. So just turning the coppers into silvers doesn't help your money density as much as... money density is the complete wrong term for this, but you want to pack your money in as small a form as possible. So you want a couple golds, have as few stop cards as possible. Instead, you are just using up stop card space on silvers.
Yeah, I would trash a bunch of those silvers.
Looks like Shorty is just realizing it's a single buy board.
Workshop has not been gained, which is a shame.
A lot of good Workshop targets here.
Yeah.
I will say these players definitely really like Throne Room.
Which is good. Throne Room's a good card to like.
It is. I'm not sure that all of their tempo choices for Throne Room are particularly good.
They've been underutilizing it a little bit, but...
It seems like they're adding Throne Rooms a lot of time before they have a ton of good targets for it. But it's certainly a very good card and one that I like building with, and I think they are doing a good job of using it and showing it off here.
See, one thing I'd be thinking about is like how many gains can I get per turn, right? So if you're button at the moment, all you can feasibly do is buy a card and play your Artisan. And so if I'm trying to maximize the amount of value in my deck, I'd be really, really trying to line up my Artisan with a Throne Room whenever possible, so I could get 3 gains instead of 2. And they seem content to just not ever do that. They keep throning like everything else except the most important card. Like this mine, for example. There's no point in throwing it. It's like two golds and a silver is like the best possible composition of treasures because you've got 8 within 3 treasures. It makes no difference whether it's 3 golds or 2 golds and a silver. It makes no difference if you have additional silvers in your hand after that. Actually, it's worse if you have additional silvers because they're taking up space.
Yeah, your deck is way more reliable the less treasure cards you have in it, because ideally everything that's not a treasure card will be cards that draw, or at least aren't stop cards. And so your deck is way more reliable in finding those 3 stop cards.
Yeah. Well, now they have to throw in the village. I would have just played the village once and then thrown the smithy. But this is fine as long as they throw in the Artisan.
Yep.
In fact, I'd probably gain a workshop off of it, so I could like. It's probably. I mean, it's late. It's real late for the
throw in the
workshop.
mine. Come on, don't throw in the mine.
But better late than never.
Don't.
All right.
Yeah, let's go.
One duchy is fine. Do we know what those bottom cards are? I think there's some silvers down there. Rather than getting 2 duchies, I'd probably take a smithy and draw, because I think this next set of cards might be a bad one. Let me check. They've got one more gold down there at the very least.
And they also just top deck 2 silvers, so this next hand's looking real rough.
Yeah, I think they've set themselves up to dud here. They have. Yep. Yeah, this was a mistake, not thinking about your next hand. Now, earlier, was it Button earlier, I think, who seemed like overly cautious in thinking about their next hand. Like, rather than take important value this turn, they were like setting up a smithy and a village for the next turn. When you could have just drawn through the cards to solve the problem. Here, they couldn't draw through the cards to solve the problem, and they top deck additional bad cards anyway.
Oh, why'd they buy a gold? No, you're really far behind in points. You gotta buy a duchy.
Yeah, really confused by the... I mean, I'd be confused by buying a gold at any point, but certainly here, when you're trailing by 15 points, the duchy's a whole lot more valuable. This stage in the game. With 3 provinces left, you start wanting duchies.
It's a pretty funny library. It just draws nothing but treasure.
Yeah.
But it works.
I mean, libraries could draw you nothing but treasure if you wanted it to.
Yeah. Okay, so here, Button should do something like artisan for a smithy.
I was just going to take a library.
Oh, yeah, library works too.
Take like a library in a village or something. Now, why do you want a duchy? You can do better than that. Draw your deck.
Yeah, you have the lead here. Just take a province. You don't need to be cutting your turn short trying to score as much as possible right now.
Well, it's not too late. Gain a library. Village. Okay.
And top deck. Okay, whatever. I don't know. I'm confused.
I don't think. Yeah. Maybe it didn't cross their mind that they could gain a draw card and then also play that draw card.
So that is one of the reasons why Artisan is so good, is because it lets you do gain and play. So in general, you can think of it like you buy a card, and that card has to go into your discard pile. It has to wait till you shuffle, and then you have to find the card. And that's how long it'll take from buying the card to getting any positive effects from the card. But with gain and play, you can shorten that to not even ever having it hit your discard pile. You can just have a card that you gain, and then you immediately can get the benefits from it. So it's one of the most powerful things in this game.
Yeah, I agree with that. I like to liken it to compound interest. You know, if you buy a card, you got to wait till next turn to get the benefits of it. Whereas if you gain it and then play it the same turn, you get it immediately. And then that short-term benefit of having played the card a turn sooner then makes your next turn better, which makes the following turns better and so forth, and it compounds on itself. And so getting to gain a card and then also play it is really helpful for escalating your deck really quickly. It also helps because you can like know what card you're missing right now, like, oh no, I'm short a village, and just gain a village to smooth out your turn.
So this will be the first board without a village that we've seen in this match.
Yeah, so this looks substantially weaker. I think I'm still trying to draw my deck here.
Yeah, I think we open Moneylender, and I'm looking for a stack of labs here.
Yeah, I would
think an artisan to gain some labs sounds really good.
Yeah, Moneylender silver, I think, and then at some point you switch over from your single terminal play being 1 Moneylender to 1 artisan, and then gain a bunch of labs, and then I think I'd still rather merchant plus like a silver or 2 as payload than a bunch of treasures, because draw is a little bit limited.
Agreed. So yeah, let's talk about this vassal opening.
I like Vassal in a lot of cases. I'm going to disagree with JC Thrust there that Vassal is just generally a bad card. I do, however, agree that it is bad here. Vassal, so thinking about Vassal, if it fails to hit an action card, so if you play it for +2, you've got the same effect as a silver, but it costs you an action. And, actions are real valuable. And in fact, in this kingdom, you only have one action to go around and no way to increase that. There's no village, there's no throne room, no festival. And so if you've spent your one action per turn on the vassal, well, you're not playing anything else. And so vassal that doesn't hit actions is kind of sad. It's silver, but you wasted an action.
Lab, buy a lab.
If you, there we go, laboratory. If you play vassal and you manage to hit an action, like there's an action on the top of your deck, then it's functionally like a silver that also gives you +1 card. So I would think of vassal in its best case as kind of being like a conspirator, like +1 card, +1 action, +2 coins, which is substantially better than silver because drawing cards is good if you can line it up. And so there's a lot of base set kingdoms, especially ones like Sentry and like where you can trash roll thin and have your deck full of actions, where vassal can be the best payload because it's like a silver that doesn't take up space in your deck because it just draws an additional card. But this is just not one of those kingdoms. I got lucky there.
Yep. Good hit.
And just laboratory here.
Yep. Don't buy gold.
Oh, oh, sad.
So just because you hit 6 doesn't mean you have to buy something for 6. Gold tends to be weaker than most of the good 5 costs in this game, and laboratory is one of the best 5 costs in the game. Maybe that's a little extreme, but it's a very good card. Yeah. It doesn't really have weaknesses. It's just Pot of Greed.
Yes. There are a lot of base set kingdoms where you could want 2 or even 3 artisans. This is not one of those kingdoms because, there's only +1 action to go around, period. So you can't play multiple artisans per turn. But definitely in other kingdoms, you might, if you hit 6, buy a second artisan.
Yeah. It definitely makes sense, I think, to have both. Or to have a second artisan. It's not something I'm going out of my way for, but I can definitely see myself adding it. Council room.
Well, not here. Definitely not in this kingdom. I don't want a second artisan. I was just saying in a lot of kingdoms, you might consider a second artisan if you hit 6 again. Council room's real bad here. The main reason is it's terminal.
Buy, but it's terminal, and it draws your opponent a card, and you filled up your deck with actions, which means this council room is going to draw into a bunch of cards that you can't play.
Yeah. So if you have a kingdom without villages, sometimes that means you can't build an engine, right? Like, villages are kind of important because you want to play a lot of actions. But sometimes you have a good way to draw your cards non-terminally. So like laboratory, for example, draws cards, but it's not a terminal action. It gives you +1 action. And so you could easily get thin with Moneylender, play a bunch of labs, and draw your deck consistently anyway. But if there's no villages, you have to consider, like, I'm only playing 1 terminal action card every single turn. I got to make sure, A, that I don't have too many of those because they're just getting in the way. Any additional ones are useless. And then B, that I choose like the one that has the most impact for the deck. And so often in these like single terminal games, you just kind of considering like of all the terminal action cards, which is like Artisan, Moneylender, Library, Bureaucrat, Workshop, and mostly Vassal, which is the one that I would most likely to be playing at the end of my turn after I've played all my labs. I think the answer is like early Moneylender, and then eventually Artisan once you can afford it. And so adding this Council Room in is bad because it's another terminal action. Did I list Council Room? If I didn't, Council Room's also terminal. Because if you're playing Council Room this turn, you're not playing your Moneylender, you're not playing your Artisan.
Yeah, I think the key thing here is that you are starting off using Moneylender as your terminal, and then you're switching to Artisan at some point as your main terminal.
Yep.
And so at that point, you're probably not going to play Moneylender much. And adding more terminals to the deck after that is just going to add cards that don't do anything.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so this should be Province Lab.
I would accept double lab as well.
Yeah.
Province Lab, that's also totally reasonable.
And this is the problem with Merchant when you both only have 1 silver and you're not drawing your deck.
Well, yeah. So Merchant, I think, would not be a bad card here if you'd prioritize deck control a little bit more. So, like, instead of adding so many golds, you added more labs. You would be finding those merchants with those silvers reliably every turn. So gold makes your deck a bit harder to draw. You've added 1 additional card that's getting in the way. Lab makes your deck a bit easier to draw. You're drawing 1 additional card that you wouldn't have otherwise. And so if all those golds had been additional labs, you'd be finding those merchants every turn.
Mm-hmm. So here we're seeing that exact scenario we were talking about, where they drew into 3 terminals, and they're kind of stuck now trying to figure out what the best play is.
Is Vassal better than gold really a hot take? I don't think that's a particularly hot take.
Yeah, it seems pretty lukewarm.
Let me check my gain rates for Vassal and gold real fast. I can't imagine that I gain gold more than Vassal.
I don't know. I certainly buy, but you might gain it more.
I buy Vassal in 49% of games and gain it in 55%. Gold, I buy in 15% of games and gain in 35%. So yeah, Vassal wins by a large margin and is not close.
So it is worth remembering that every time you're playing this council room, you are giving a free card to your opponent.
I'm not seeing how that's a sample bias, Halo Andy. If you want, I guess, a baseline estimate for buying gold, I would find that if you check the other players' stat sheets, I think it tends to range from like 15 to 25% at the highest. Like I think maybe like RTT buys gold in like 22% of games or something like that. It's not high. you're not gonna find any players who are buying gold in like more than a quarter of games. I don't think. Maybe Wandering Winder. Let me check. He's probably the goldiest of the bunch. We'll see. Well, I'm gonna assume this is the maximum that you could reasonably buy gold. Is however much Wandering Winder buys it. Wandering Winder buys gold in a whopping 26% of games. Goodness gracious, that's a lot. I set 25% as the maximum. He's exceeded that. He gets gold ever so slightly more than 1/4 of the time. If that tells you how strong gold is. All right, so now we're just taking duchies, I assume. Top deck coppers here, because you're just buying a duchy anyway. You don't need to have 7 money. You can go, yeah, there we go. Oh well.
What? No, no.
Duchy and merchant.
Okay.
They only have the 1 silver, don't they? I don't.
Yeah.
Merchant's fine.
And someone has 2 silvers now. I'm not sure who.
Yeah, let's find out. Oh, Button has all the silvers. Oh. Yeah, that's pretty reasonable then. It's a good question, DZ. I don't know. Now, to be fair, we haven't been in kingdoms where the penultimate province rule was really a relevant thing because they had like additional buys and gains around. But we can discuss that real fast. In general, in base games, and especially early on, if you're playing like simple money kingdoms in like the base set, there's this thing that's going to come up a lot of the time, which is the penultimate province rule, which is penultimate means second to last for anyone who doesn't know fancy words. The idea is if there's 2 provinces left and you're trailing by like a few points, it can actually be really bad to buy the second to last province. So like let's say it's like 30 to 28, and I have 28, and it's my turn. I don't want to buy the second to last province because I will take a points lead. I'll be up 34 to 30. But now there's 1 province left, and then if they buy that last province, well, now they win 36 to 34. And so if I'm in that scenario, what you often want to do is buy a duchy, and then I go up 31 to 30, and that's less, but now there's still 2 provinces left. So if they buy the province and try to take that 36-31 lead, well, now I get to take an additional turn. I can buy the last province and win 37-36. And so often in simple games where there's only like one gain to go around, if you're behind by a few points with 2 provinces left, you don't touch the second to last province. And then you often get into what is referred to as duchy dancing, where you're taking duchies back and forth to avoid taking that second to last province until someone's kind of forced to. And so that comes up some of the time. Now, it tends to break down when you can gain additional cards per turn. Like if I'm threatening on my turn to not just take a province, but like a province and a duchy, or 2 provinces, then it doesn't help you to just go up by a slight amount of points.
Yeah, and so a big part of what's going on at a high level in this game is you need to be able to calculate what your opponent's deck can do in terms of gains. Well, you know, how many victory cards can they add if they get their deck working and they get a good turn, and try to play around that. So as decks get more and more complicated, there are things like, as Andy's bringing up, where you can quad province. So, you know, you have to answer questions like, if I leave 3 provinces left, is that safe?
Yeah, I definitely...
And it all kind of generalizes from the PPR.
Yeah, I've played games where I was like, can I take this 6th to last province safely? Or are they going to be able to take 5 provinces next turn?
Yep.
And that comes up sometimes. So here...
Play enough governor games.
Yeah. Now, we just spent a bunch of time explaining why Council Room was so bad in the last Kingdom. Here, it's actually a real important card.
Yep.
So, important difference here is we got abundant villages. We have Throne Room and we have Festival. So, 2 ways to get plus action. But we have no other draw. We don't have any non-terminal draw like Laboratory. So, the only way to draw additional cards is going to be to play like Festival or Throne Room on some action card and then play Council Room to draw. So, Council Room will be more important here.
So here we have everything we kind of look for in an engine and base, right? We have Sentry for amazing trashing. We have Throne Room and Festival for villages and just sort of support. And we have a really good draw card that also gives you plus buy. So you can definitely really build here. And you have Workshop.
Yeah. So as far as the opening goes, I think I would open Silver Poacher. Yeah, we see...
I like that.
Shorty open Silver Poacher. Button open Silver Merchant. So Merchant... Comparing Merchant to Poacher, they do the exact same thing. Plus 1 card, plus 1 action, plus 1 coin. 1 second. Sorry. My dog wanted to get up on the bed, but she's too old, so I have to pick her up every time. Anyways, so Merchant and Poacher both give plus 1 card, plus 1 action, plus 1 coin. The difference is, in the early game, Merchant is only going to activate if you find it in the same hand as your Silver, which you're under 50% likely to do. Right? More often than not, I think 6/11 of the time, you will fail to line those up. I'm not sure if that math is exact, but something along those lines.
Okay, so Shorty is now twice in a row hit 6 and bought gold.
Oh no!
They have no sentries.
No. Oh no!
All the 5 costs here, with the exception of mine, are really good. You want a deck that's got sentries for trashing. You want some festivals and council rooms. Your main thing. Market's just a good card. Throne Room's good.
Yeah,
like,
just hold off on making mistakes until turn 12. I'm still talking about the opening issues. So yeah, Merchant and Poacher, the difference is Poacher always gives you plus 1, whereas Merchant is going to whiff more than half the time when you only have 1 silver in your deck and it's not thin. Now, Poacher is going to get worse eventually once piles run out. You're not going to want to get a bunch of Poachers or anything, because once the pile empties, it's going to make you discard. But in the early game, it's important to focus on the early game. You know, benefits early are going to snowball and give you big benefits later. And so early on, I just want to maximize my chance of hitting 5 here. And Poacher is just more likely to do that than the Merchant, because it's going to give you money more often. And so I like Poacher Silver. Now, the goal of these openings should be to get Sentry. And this is going to go back to the mistake you were talking about a second ago, is we don't have Chapel here. We don't have a cheap Trasher, so you can't open with your Trasher. Now, the best trashing card here, by a long shot, actually, yeah, the only one really. We said mine's not really a Trasher. The only Trasher here is Sentry, and Sentry's a great card. And so what I want to be doing in the opening, when I've only got 3 and 4, is improving my deck's likelihood of hitting 5 as quickly as possible. So on turns 3 and 4, I want to maximize my chance of hitting 5. And Poacher Silver, I think, does that really well. And then you get some sentries in your deck, then you get thin, and then you can build from there. And I think Poacher Silver gets you to sentries. Now, we saw they did that, and then they hit 6, and they're like, oh, I've got 6, not 5. I guess I can't buy Sentry, which costs 5. I'll buy gold instead. And that's a a humongous blunder, like absolutely enormous. Like if I saw my opponent buy a gold over a sentry in this kingdom, I'd be like, all right, I've already won the game. Gold is the antithesis of what you want in your deck. You're trying to get thin so your engine can kick off. Gold is just getting in the way, making your deck thicker. It does nothing for you. Actively worse than nothing, I would think, in that situation. Sentry is just so good. Gold is so bad.
Yeah. And to talk to what Andy was saying, you definitely, sentries, you want a couple. Early on, the more you have, the better your trashing is going to be. And then there's still a top-notch sifter to get green cards out from your draw once you don't have cards you want to trash anymore.
Yeah, number of sentries is a good question. I mean, if you open with sentry, like if you happen to have the 5-2 opening and you could get it early, you could maybe even get by with just one sentry even. Now here, if you don't have sentry in the opening and you have to buy it turn 3 or turn 4, then you might need multiples to start trashing, because sentry, like Chapel, is going to get less reliable as the game goes on. It's going to be harder to line up. One thing that you can do here, of course, is you can use your cellar to line up the sentries you do have. There's this problem that sentry often has where, like, it's really bad at trashing the last few jump cards in your deck. Like when you only got like one estate and one copper left, say, it's really hard for your sentry to happen to find those exact cards on the top of your deck when you play it. And so those ones can be like, they can stick around for a while and you have trouble trashing them. The way to get around that here would be to discard those cards with your estate and your copper. Sorry, discard your estate and your copper with your cellar, and then draw back to the end of your deck. And now you know they're coming up at the very bottom, and then you can play a sentry and guarantee that you hit those and trash them. All right, now while we're talking about that, it seems like we've encountered another error. Shorty bought a province.
Greening.
Early greening. No good. This is probably the other major mistake I would say newer players often make, additional to buying gold, is buying early provinces. You've got a kingdom that can do things, then you want to build your deck until you can do a lot of those things. And buying a province is just like destroying your deck. You've taken a turn where you had a ton of money and could have added a lot of value to your deck, like a bunch of good action cards, and you've instead added a card that gets in the way and slows your deck down. Province is even worse than gold in that it's taking up space and gives no value whatsoever. And so buying an early province, you may think, oh, I've got the points lead, I'm ahead now. But now your deck quality is way behind, and your opponent's just going to build a much stronger deck and outpace you.
Yep. In the same way that we've been talking about mistakes snowballing, it's very hard to recover your deck once you've added a bunch of stop cards like provinces in, whereas it's very easy to go in the other direction and keep making your engine better until you green sort of all at once.
Yeah. And the other mistake that often shows up is in the face of someone else who bought an early province, a lot of players feel this pressure, quite inaccurately, to start provincing themselves. Like, oh no, my opponent bought a province. Their deck must be way better than mine. I better try to catch up by buying more provinces. And that's like the worst thing you can do in response to that early province. Is the deck's not better than yours. It's worse. They've added a green card to it, and so they're actively hurting their own deck. If you ignore that and keep building, you're gonna have a much better deck long term, and you'll eventually outscore it. You can be down like 3 or 4 provinces and be totally fine. So definitely council room here. Not sure what the second 5 is. Could be.
I can see another festival.
Council room, throne room, council room, festival, council room. Maybe double council room even. It's probably the best because they have no draw. It definitely was not gold. I know for sure the answer was not buy gold there. Yeah, so council room at 10 is a real tragedy here. Again, you wouldn't need a million golds if you just reliably drew the payload that you did have in your deck. And then there's a card here that draws you a lot of cards. Who's playing well? I don't want to answer that.
Shorty is up in games, right? I think it's 2-1 in Shorty's favor.
I actually have no idea what the score is. Honestly, I'm so bad.
This is typical commentator curse. Like I can never actually remember. I'm gonna check with Dompot.
Oh, you trash that last estate. That's good. Now discard this throne room. Good. You knew that you were about to draw the throne room and not be able to use it, so discarding it there was the best play.
Yeah, it's 2-1 in Shorty's favor.
Okay. So here we buy 2 throne rooms. Not 2. I mean 2 council rooms. The other room.
You gotta get those council rooms. I mean, it's
all right. All right.
There
all
we
right.
go.
No. Well, you got 1 council room. I'll give you a pass. Just this once. If you want a payload there, it could have been Council Room Festival or Council Room and 2 Merchants. I don't think your deck is really lacking in payload, though. It's lacking in draw. I'd probably discard the Throne Room just so my next Sentry play sees more cards. All this really... Maybe you could discard the Merchant for the same reason. I'll discard one of them. I just want to maximize the chance I find that Council Room. And discarding 1 allows my Sentry to see more cards and potentially discard an irrelevant card. I would definitely discard this Festival. Like, all that matters here is you find that Council Room. It's the only draw card in your deck. You find that, your turn is going to be twice as good as it otherwise would be. Discard both of these. Nope, we're just not going to discard any of it. Yeah, so the Council Room is somewhere towards the bottom, and they don't seem at all focused on finding it. And it means they're playing with a 5-card hand instead of an 8-card hand. Potentially an 11-card hand if you manage to line up Throne Room and Council Room.
So you can be tossing cards here, like Merchant and Silver. You don't need to toss Merchant, obviously, because it draws itself. But you can use Sentry to toss some of these Silvers that you're drawing better.
Yeah. Like, if you find your draw cards, you'll draw back around to these other cards anyway. You don't have to think, like, oh, Festival's a good card. It costs 5. I better not discard it. Because if you find your Council Room, you'll get back around to that Festival. So now all we need to do for this following turn for Button is find a village. Because they have the Council Room, but no villages in hand.
Yep.
Okay, so Shorty's deck desperately needs the Council Room. We'll see if they pick one up.
So, let's see. What is Button's last card? I have not been paying enough attention.
I don't know.
I'm not even going to try to guess what their last card is, but hopefully they can find either a village or a throne room and get a good kickoff turn.
Yeah, so it'll be hard to find a throne room because you'll need to find a throne room and another cantrip action, so like Sentry or Poacher.
Well, if you find the throne room first, you can use it on a Sentry.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Is you have to find the throne room immediately to throw in the Sentry and then play the Council Room.
Yeah. Okay.
But with Festival, you don't necessarily need to find it immediately. Like if you see a Festival with your Sentry, like it shows as a Festival on the top, then you can draw that Festival with your second Sentry and then still be able to play Council Room. Oh, hey. That's unfortunate. Yeah, so now if they draw the Throne Room, it's too late, because they won't have a good target for it left in hand. So I just discard the Throne Room. Oh, or not. Discard the Sentry now?
I guess.
I mean, there's presumably you're drawing.
That's a little sad.
Second Council Room.
Sure.
Sorry, I gave that more of a questioning intonation than it should have. Second Council Room.
Second Council Room.
Yeah, it's a command, not a question, not advice. All right, so Shorty really needs to get on that first Council Room, but I expect it's not going to happen.
I think at this point they're committed to greening.
Yeah, we're long past the attempt to build a deck phase. Um, yeah, I think they kind of underbuilt this kingdom pretty heavily.
Yeah. And for what it's worth, you don't want to play those sentries immediately just because you could, I mean, not the sentries, the festivals, because you could end up drawing a throne room with no actions, like right here.
Yeah, yeah, if you'd save
and
the festivals for
if you
later.
still have the festival in hand, you could throne it. You don't get anything by playing it earlier in the turn.
Yeah, it's passed up on 2 free money. Yeah, I think often, like, a good rule, play order is difficult and complicated, like explaining what order to play cards in. But like a decent rule of thumb is like play the stuff that gives you information before playing the stuff that might require that you have additional information. So like Sentry's going to show you what cards are coming up, and then you can decide whether you want to play Festival or Throne Festival or whatever.
So here, if the decks were a little stronger, you'd really have to think about whether you want to take that province, because potentially they could, double province. But with the decks that Shorty has, I don't think their deck is going to hit double province. I mean, it can, but it just seems a bit unlikely right now.
Yeah, I think what JC Thress is saying is another way to phrase that is like the cards that require that you have information are generally going to be cards that make you make decisions. Now, that being said, that wasn't even that phrasing of the rule, I guess, wouldn't even cover this case, because like Festival's not a card that directly makes you make a decision, but it's a card that you might want to use a throne room on. So indirectly, so it will still be true. I would probably just leave that counter room on top. Well, nope, they don't want to. So you already have 8. You got 2 silvers, a gold, and a merchant. And 8's honestly more than you need, because you probably just want to buy duchy here. I would rather leave the counter room on top and then threaten to have a big turn, rather than draw a bunch of actions you can't use and then
dance.
I don't think they can get to double.
I mean,
can they?
Yeah, there's something to be said here about.
I mean, if they can get to double province, then yeah, this works out. I was just thinking take a duchy and then leave a counter room on top, and you're gonna have a great
to hit double.
Oh, maybe they get there. Well, that works out then. The difference, 1 counter room mix.
It's a good card. All right, 2/2.
Well, counter room is not that good of a card in general. It was definitely good in this kingdom because it was the only draw and a strong engine, so you had to get it. But I'm not gonna say that counter room.
I think it's pretty good in the context of base. Okay, so the score is now tied up 2-2, if I'm recalling correctly.
Interesting. Why is that, DZ?
And I got kicked out again. Coming. Yeah, I know when I played base a lot casually, we thought Council Room Money was very strong. Especially if multiple people are playing it, 'cause you just get tossed so many cards.
And I actually just played Council Room Money the other day in some really weak kingdom. It is not a common thing, for sure.
No.
Okay, so here...
Yeah, Council Room Militia is one of those great base combos that I think gives base some of its unique flavor.
Yeah. So now we've got a kingdom where trashing is going to be the weak spot. You got definitely enough to build here. You can build a big engine here. But we don't have Chapel. We don't have a Sentry. And those are the 2 really strong trashers. And we don't have Moneylender, which is like the 3rd best trasher because it gets rid of your coppers really easy. We got Remodel. Remodel is good at getting rid of estates because it can turn them into 3s and 4s. And it's really bad at getting rid of coppers because you don't want to fill your deck with 7 sellers. That's probably even worse than having 7 coppers. You can turn a copper into like a seller or 2, but seller has quickly diminishing value in your deck when you have a bunch of them. So thinning is going to be hard here. That being said, there's good draw. We've got both laboratory and council room. And so what I'd be trying to do is like get a remodel to get those estates out of my deck. And I think for the most part, you're probably just going to live with having coppers in your deck and try to draw through them.
You could definitely, you have village and council room and lab, so there's no reason why you can't be drawing through. You have to add a lot more draws that you can't trash, but you definitely can get deck control here.
This is actually a rare kingdom where I think mine could see play. Like, certainly, I mean, we're not in the realm of like mine being like an actively good card or anything, but like you got coppers and you can't otherwise get rid of them, and you're gonna need some payload. Turning the coppers into silvers would not be the worst thing, since you can't trash the coppers normally. So you can consider picking up a
Thresh and Halo. Yeah, Remodel's a good card. It's not a trasher, but it's a good card.
Yeah, I like Remodel. Yeah, Remodel's really bad at trashing coppers, but get rid of the stage, which is good. And the Remodel has a lot of value in the late game, and you want to turn your cards into other cards to lower piles. So let's look at what they opened. So we've got Silver Poacher from Shorty. That's totally fine. I think I probably would have opened like Silver Remodel and try to get in on that trashing earlier. But you can just take Silver Poacher and try to get a jump start to the $5 cards. Button opened Cellar Laboratory. I think that's also totally reasonable. I think any of the 5s except Library I think could potentially be open with. You could also open Remodel anyway, like Cellar Remodel would not be bad.
Yeah, I don't really like that. I don't think you want to open Cellar here.
You could just open nothing. Just buy a 5 and not buy a Cellar. That's also fine.
I think that's what I would do on 5 too.
So Shorty bought a gold. I guess rather than reinvent the wheel, just if you're watching this, Shorty, rewind to like the many previous times we were complaining about gold and just like listen to that again. There's a lot of good action cards here. A lot of good action cards. And I would not be passing up on those if I had the opportunity to acquire them. All right, Laboratory, I like it.
Lab's a great card.
So like
it's the glue that holds base decks together.
Yeah. A council room in a village is going to draw more than a lab. But it's also going to draw your opponent a card, and it's going to be a little bit less reliable because you have to line up both of them for it to work. And so council room village versus laboratory is not like a trivial choice. Lab's like a little bit more modest in its ambitions, more reliable.
Yeah, lab, it does exactly what it says on the tin. It increases your hand size. Doesn't really have drawbacks or anything. It's a very simple card, but it's excellent because it does exactly what you want to do. You have this non-terminal card that can draw more cards.
Well, I hope we're not playing money.
Money does not look good here.
Remodel still at 10 is a bit of a shame. Estate is a really bad card. In fact, between your opening cards, Estate is like a lot worse than Copper is, and often more important to trash. Because
I mean, especially in the context of Council Room draw, like you really don't mind having Coppers that much, but you want those Estates out of there. You can't do anything with them.
Yeah. Plus, Remodel trashes them for benefit. You can turn those Estates into poachers or villages or merchants.
Yep. I don't see a world where I'm not opening Remodel here. I mean, I guess there's something to be said about like Poacher instead, but
I think you could reasonably do like Poacher Silver, early labs, and then add a Remodel next time you hit 4 would also be totally fine. Lab on 7 is good. I like that. I'm proud of them. They didn't buy gold. They've resisted the temptation.
Well, Button just bought a gold.
Well, Button, do what Shorty did that last turn. Shorty made the right decision. Village Council Room, I dig it. Lab, also good. So here we're seeing them buy. They're still buying golds here and there, which is a shame. They shouldn't be doing that. But like we're seeing them click a lot of the draw cards, which is good. Not like the previous game where they just avoided Council Room like the plague, or the Library Moat game where they avoid both those cards. Here we're seeing them get the draw cards, and I like that.
JC Thrust, the thing about opening lab is it doesn't really do a ton for you early on when you don't have particularly good cards. lets you hit slightly higher price points, but Lab isn't a particularly strong card to open.
You could open like Council Room and then buy like a village on the remodel in the next 2 turns. It's also an option.
That sounds reasonable.
The 5-2 open, I think, is not totally clear.
Yeah, it's a little ambiguous on this board. I'm also not sure if it's better than 3-4.
All right, so Shorty's getting places. So, do they have the remodel or does their opponent? I guess we're about to find out. They do not. So yeah, remodel absolutely here. 1000% remodel. Could be like, you could even like add like a, I was about to say mine, but probably not mine. Don't like the province. Don't like the province at all. I was thinking like remodel and 2 labs or something like that.
Yeah, taking the lab seems good.
And even if you were trying to do this like early province thing, which again you shouldn't, remodel will be really significant in that deck. Because if your goal is to like try to like score really early so that you like beat your opponent to the punch or something like that, the best way to do that is to remodel provinces back into provinces to bring the game to a close really fast. Mm-hmm. Which I mean, like, I wouldn't, but if that's your goal, then remodel is going to facilitate it.
So interestingly, we just saw Button not toss all the cards they could have tossed with a seller. Not sure why. They only tossed some of their coppers and estates.
They might have wanted to remodel this estate. I don't know why they didn't toss the other coppers. Wait, why
did they just not play the remodel? They had actions.
Why did we get the remodel? If not to trash the estates, is it just decorative?
It's a very nice hammer.
Yeah. Is it a hammer? Is that what's going on? I don't even know what the picture is.
I don't actually.
It's not a hammer. It's like a paper.
I was thinking of the mine art.
Paper and like a pencil.
I was looking at mine.
The remodel art's okay. What's the best?
I'm not sure what's going on, but it seems cool.
Laboratories kind of got a lot of confusing stuff going on. I'm not a big fan of that one.
I think Laboratory is literally a pot of greed. Like, I just see the big brown, like, amorphous silo, and I'm like, yeah, it's a pot.
I like Market. I think Village is my favorite. It's a nice, quaint picture. I'm going to say Village is the best art in this kingdom.
In this kingdom?
Yeah. Of the ones I can currently visualize. Don't ask me
to recall the part. I thought Council Room was a guy standing there, like the candelabra. I thought that was a person.
Oh, like a person in front of the table. I'd never thought about it like that, but I can kind of see where you're getting at. Cello's kind of cool. Most of the base card art is not bad.
It definitely is more consistent style-wise than some of the stuff in expansions where you have cards that don't look anything like each other.
Yeah. Yeah, expansion has some real nice card art, but also some really terrible card art on a few of them. Like Shantytown.
Which is going to happen when you have 500 cards.
Yeah. And also a variety of artists.
Yep.
Ooh, sad hands.
Oh, that's cool, DZ.
Why am I not surprised that DZ like knows each individual artist for the individual cards? Is Matthias Katrain one of the better artists? I guess I would assume so, because these base cards are not poorly drawn.
I certainly like the art. I don't know any of the artists for different cards, though. That's not at all the things I pay attention to in this game.
DZ is like the walking Dominion encyclopedia.
Yeah, DZ doesn't memorize card artists. They just know cool facts about Dominion.
All right, so
here you don't want to break PPR, I think. I think it's probably 2 duchies.
Well, Button's already ahead in points, so the general penultimate province advice doesn't necessarily
I guess they need... Well, okay, so they could, since they're player 1, they need province, duchy, estate.
Yeah, I think province there is reasonable. 2 duchies would also not be bad. Like the opponent could theoretically do that, but I think only with like an ideal draw, and they already passed up their council rooms. Yeah, so here he is by Dutchy and be sad.
Yep. Nothing to do about it.
Shorty, I think, just kind of had an unfortunate shuffle the previous turn, and I think they've replicated it here, which is their council rooms were stuck with each other, but without any villages next to them. And they've got the one village here, but do they have any other villages coming up in these next 5 cards? They might not. I think they might destroy this other. Yeah, I don't. I really dislike when players call GG. Like
JC Thrust, we were talking about that in etiquette recently.
Yeah.
You can go in the etiquette channel and talk with everyone about when you should and shouldn't say GG, which I just mindlessly say after every game. Like I don't even think about it.
After every game is totally fine. Before the game is ended is not. If they win here after calling GG, it's just going to show how silly that was. Don't you say GG when the game is over, not when you think the game is going to be over soon. Oh,
that's cool, DZ. I didn't know that. Provinces were originally worth 5.
Yeah, I agree with JC Threats. If I saw my opponent type GG, I'd just stop playing. Like, all right, they're imminently resigning, and they must be typing GG because they plan to click resign now.
Yep, that's what I do. I resign a lot.
They should have it now. Yep, there it is.
Yep. Okay, so Button pulls ahead 3-2.
When is it bad form to resign? I don't think it's ever particularly bad form to resign.
I think at all levels, resigning is absolutely fine.
I mean, I always type GG before resigning, like right before resigning, just to show it's not like out of anger or anything. It's just like, all right, this game's over. I acknowledge that you've won. Let's get on to the next one.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Was that 5 games? I don't even know. I've lost
track. Yeah, it's 5 games. It is 3-2 in Button's favor. So we are going to game 6 now.
All righty. Ooh, what have we here? No trashing. Well, there's mine, but mine doesn't count. No trashing.
We got bureaucrat guardians, clearly.
Ew. Don't give them ideas. Yeah, so I think here you're definitely building. It's going to be unreliable and kind of sad because, yeah, counts room militia is a big thing where you play a bunch of counts rooms and then you draw them a ton of cards and they got like a 9-card hand and then you're like, psych, militia. You have to discard 6 cards now. That's a scary combo. Yeah, so I think mostly I'm clicking on lots of like festival, council room, laboratory, and a militia in there. Cellar will be important because there's so much junk here. Cellar looks a lot more valuable than useful than usual, where you sift through all the coppers and estates to find your draw cards to kick off your turn.
Okay, militia open seems reasonable to me. It's either militia or poacher.
Militia and bureaucrat swapped names. I don't really have a strong opinion on which name fits which card better. I could see it either way.
Yeah. Militia is just so ingrained with me now as hand size attack that it seems weird, but...
Well, bureaucrat's also hand size attack, just a bad one.
Okay, good point.
Yeah, I would think the opening here is a pretty clear militia silver. Militia hurts a lot, and those make you likely to hit 5.
Oh, bureaucrat.
Militia vassal is a little bit less appealing because if you see the militia and the vassal in the same hand, you're sad and can't play them both.
Yeah.
We haven't seen like a good vassal kingdom. Base often has good vassal kingdoms. It usually involves vassal lining up with sentry.
Yeah. They can be awkward at lower levels when you tend to see players trash down to like nothing but vassals, and then they have the problem that they can't play them from their hand.
Or I think more often even is the other scenario where they don't trash at all and they put a bunch of treasures in the deck and they add vassal anyway, and then the vassal just starts missing a lot.
Yeah.
right, so we've seen a bureaucrat get acquired by Button. Really dislike that. I'm not looking to add a bunch of... this bureaucrat in general is a terrible card. It's like the worst card in base, I would say. Mine gives it a run for its money, I guess, but mine at least...
No, bureaucrat's worse.
Yeah. Adding silvers is not that good. Like, silver is best used as, like, a way to get up to 5. You know, like, I'm buying this silver in the short term because I want to get to the $5 cards, and this is just, like, my stopgap. Bureaucrat gets you silvers, but slower. You're, like, adding a card that the turn you play it is worse than nothing. It's taking up space in your hand to get silvers for the future. And that's the opposite of what you're trying to do. You're slowing down your deck in the short term to add long-term silvers. And silver is not the card you want long-term. Silver is the short-term thing you take to get to the long-term cards. And so bureaucrat is kind of giving you silvers while defeating the point. And then
on top of that, it puts the silvers on top of your deck, which means that you have a stop card sitting there, and it's going to be hard to get your turn kicked off.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you play bureaucrat at the end of your turn. Next turn, you have one jump card in the next hand, and you're less likely to find your labs and your council rooms and stuff. Would bureaucrat be better if it just said +2 instead of gaining silver? Yeah, that'd be better. I mean, it'd still be worse than militia, but that'd be like a fine card. I mean, the other big problem that we won't see in this kingdom, but is generally true, is like you trash your estates and then bureaucrat does nothing. Like most kingdoms, most of the time, you play a large majority of the game with like no or almost no green cards in your deck, and so bureaucrat just has no possibility of hitting. I've been thinking about plus buy here. All right, I like the festival. Festival and council room are a good combo together.
I would really like to see them take some council rooms.
How many festivals do they already have in their deck? Did they have one?
They have... hold on.
They definitely didn't have
sure.
2 already, because one of them was in their opponent's deck. Maybe both. Let's see. Gains a fest. Yeah, that was their first festival. So I think taking festival before council room is a good choice, because obviously council room is not going to be very useful if you don't have any plus action.
So let's talk about what Button just said. I finally get more than 4 and I have 1 buy. Well, that's true, but a lot of that has to do with the way that you've been building. You haven't added plus buy and the ability to draw a plus buy that well yet. So you're only going to find it sort of randomly and not when you're also having a big turn.
Yeah. Yeah, often you got to think a little bit in advance and be like, what am I going to want next turn or the turn after that? And you'll be like, I'm starting to hit the point where my deck is hitting 5 and more than 5 reliably. Maybe it's now time to add the plus buy card. Not like, oh, I've hit 10. Well, I would have won a plus buy this turn. Now let me add it for the following turn.
You end up with that famous game where someone bought a herbalist for $26.
Oh, I've definitely played bunches of games where I bought like Candlestick Maker or Ruined Market for like 12 or 15. Sometimes, sometimes you just need the plus buy.
Sometimes that's when it makes the most sense.
Just a council room. More fest. So like. Festival is not good for the money. If you're buying Festival just to get 2 coins, you're just buying an expensive silver. Festival is good because it gives plus action, which lets you play terminal cards like Council Room that draw you a bunch of cards.
And it's plus buy.
Yeah.
But yes, without the council rooms, these festivals don't look like they're doing very much.
Yeah, like I would think Festival and Council Room together make a nice combo, but either half of that in isolation looks pretty useless.
Yeah. And in general, in council room militia boards, you want to pump up your hand and draw as much as possible because you want to be able to find that militia every turn. And there's no downside to playing a ton of council rooms if you can find your militia.
I have never in my life pulled off a successful bureaucrat pin. The only time I know of that happening was Steph doing that way back when, before I'd even started playing.
I spectated a game when I was first starting where RTT did it to someone.
I had a kingdom recently where I tried to, but it had like Haunted Woods and Bureaucrat and some other stuff I forget. I wanted to do it, but they managed to get their Haunted Woods in play early enough. They were drawing pretty reliably, and it never materialized. So I believe the example was something to the effect of like you play a discard attack like militia, for example. Getting down to like 3 cards, then you pass them an estate with like masquerade, and then you play bureaucrat to force them to top deck the estate that you just passed them, and now they've got like a 2-card hand, and then you could like repeat that one more time, pass them a second estate, and then bureaucrat it again, and then down to like a 1-card hand. But that requires a lot of setup and a very particular set of cards.
I think Tracer has said the most like reasonable pin to actually set up was, I think, Mask and Royal Carriage before Mask got changed.
Yeah, Masquerade used to, I believe, have some nasty pins to it where you get yourself down to like no cards and then just force them to pass a bunch of stuff. But that got changed a while back, I think before I even started playing.
Mm-hmm.
Council room?
Gardens. Gardens.
Like,
okay, let's talk about gardens.
I could totally see, like, if you're building a big engine here, planning to get gardens eventually. But I want to make sure I had the big engine first before adding gardens. It feels premature.
Yeah, unless you're playing a rush where you're trying to empty 3 piles in like 10 turns, you don't want to start getting gardens early. They're still VP cards, they're stop cards, even though they're cheaper. And you want to build your deck, make your deck work, and then later when you're figuring out how you're going to score, then it might make sense to use gardens as one of the main ways you score if you have a nice fat deck.
Yeah. Like, the biggest, like, there is this one strategy in base that is, like, occasionally a good thing to do, which is the workshop gardens combo, where, like, you just get a bunch of workshops, use the workshops to get a bunch of gardens, and then you pile out workshop gardens and estates. And that's really weak. There's better versions of it in expansions with cards like Groom or Ironworks, but it's, like, real weak. Usually I'd say the main effect of gardens on base is, like, it adds an additional stack of green cards you can click on, which just sort of, like, it tilts you a bit in the direction of building more. Like, if you build a really big deck, even if you get behind on provinces, you could pivot towards scoring with gardens and then still catch up. And so Gardens in the Kingdom, for example, gives you a little bit more incentive to build a bit bigger than you otherwise would. And so, like, if I were, for example, in Button's shoes and I was behind on provinces, I wouldn't worry as much as maybe normal, which is, I mean, still not that high, but, like, even less than normal, because you're like, oh, no, they get 6 provinces. I'll just take, like, all the gardens and then have, like, 8 5-point gardens before you have 8 6-point provinces. And end the game that way.
Yeah, and I was joking at the start, but a very early strategy that used to be used, and I think no one would consider it playable anymore, is Bureaucrat and Gardens, where you have some card like Bureaucrat that can sort of pump up your deck size. But it's very bad. You should not play it.
Bureaucrat Garden sounds like it could not possibly be like the best thing to do on any kingdom. Maybe if the
I'm pretty sure it loses to BMU.
Was the 2 cards Bureaucrat and Gardens. So now we're in the greening phase. I assume we just keep greening. It's like province and cellar.
Mm-hmm.
I would consider, I guess, they have some number of gardens, so I guess you could consider a copper there, just because the game is relatively likely to end before you get back around to that shuffle. And so that copper is likely to never have any impact on your deck, and could just potentially pump up your gardens points a little bit.
Are they going to take 2 gardens here? Yeah.
Not over estate. They had 3 buys. So they could have done like province estate copper or province cellar copper or something like that.
Okay, well, this should be another province for Shorty, and it's looking pretty over.
Yeah, I would say a province here kind of seals the deal. I don't see Shorty coming back.
There just aren't that many points for these gardens.
Yeah, I assume Gardens is at least 3 by this point. So probably Gardens over Duchy here. Yeah, so garden is at worst a duchy, and maybe it could become better than that if the game drags on.
Yeah, I mean, if they get lucky, they'll level them up, but the game could just end. Okay, let's see what we draw.
Oh, well.
Not enough.
The last gardens.
Okay, so you want to take the gardens there instead of duchy because you want to prevent your opponent from possibly coming back. And also it helps with pile pressure a little bit. This doesn't really matter with this little game left.
It's the gardens are worth 4 points and the duchy's only worth 3.
Oh, they have enough cards?
Yeah. I mean, like, if you're even at the, 30 card range, you should take gardens over duchy. Because it'll always be at least 3 points. And could potentially be more than that.
Yep. Okay, bye, duchy. You can do it. Oh, wow, this game does not want Button to win.
The score has started to get close, but I think this turn should seal the deal.
This has to be it.
Yeah, it looks like it's in hand now. All right, so after a long, grueling match, we end up 3-3.
Yep.
Presumably, Shorty will buy the last province. I don't think I need to.
You can stop clicking now and just win.
You've got more than 8 money. There's no need for this. Stop rubbing salt in the wound. Please don't play that, Militia. Please don't. Please don't.
Don't play the Militia.
Don't do it. Be nice. No. Why? Sadistic.
I resign here. I'm not discarding.
Yeah, I wouldn't even play their game. I would click the resign button and be like, whatever, you won.
All right. Well, fun match. Hopefully the players can learn some stuff. Always fun commentating with you, J-Nails, and thanks for tuning in, everyone.
Yeah, good game. See you around.
Hope you have a great day.